Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. We good? All right. Thank you, Steve. Yeah. Thank God y'all are here. So don't worry. Okay. I'll tell you. Every time I've taken a either lateral move or even what you would look at and consider a downward move professionally, I have always continued to move forward one way or another. All right? So we're going to move on to a different section. So first we just did business, right? Any questions about those considerations that I've presented to you? Any comments before we move on to our next one? Is this what y'all were expecting? Yes? No? Maybe? Not? Okay. All right. So the next bucket that I want to discuss is culture. Am I calling this doing absolutely nothing? Yes. All right. All right. So I'm always fascinated by how culture can be overlooked. All right? What happens in a vacuum? What happens in a vacuum? What, say again? What I heard may or may not have been what you said, but since I can't find a replacement word, I'm gonna, it messes everything up. Is that what? Sucks everything up. Okay. Not what I heard. Both are true. All right, anybody else? It grows organically. Whether or not that is the way you want it. Anybody ever seen a culture that was fabulous that no one had spent time building? Right? So my first recommendation to you is be intentional about the type of team leader, team member and or leader that you want to be. And I mean literally. How do you want to behave? How do you want people to experience you? Anybody have any experience with this they want to share? Who has inspired you? What is a culture that you were a part of that either you enjoyed, didn't enjoy, or felt, oh, maybe worst of all, right, apathetic about? So my team introduced me to a phase, Sunday Scaries. That's an awful phase. I hate that. I mean, I'm glad it's recognized, but here's the antidote to Sunday Scaries. We recently promoted a young man at Feeding Westchester. He'd earned it. We were delighted to be able to do that. And I went in to congratulate him and give him a big old hug. And he said to me, I actually look forward to coming into this office Monday and planning out my week. He said, who says that? I'm like, well, hopefully every single person that works at Feeding Westchester. Maybe a stretch, right? But I'm delighted when that occurs, and that's what we want. What I tell our team is, we work really hard. I know each of you works really, really hard, because the work that we do is very hard, and like hunger relief, you all probably are involved with social causes that are almost infinite. Almost infinite. Right? And we all have finite resources. So the question becomes, how can we be as delighted as possible to go to work every day? So I want to spend some time on this. Recognize the importance of every team member. So I get some, we'll say needling. I get some needling in the community because when I meet you, what you generally hear me say is, hi, I'm Erren, and I'm with Feeding Westchester. What do you notice about that? That's right. I did not say my title. Why did I not say my title? So that's interesting, right? Hopefully, or perhaps, I should say. One of the reasons that CEOs don't say that is because I have 65 team members at Feeding Westchester. Feeding Westchester has 65 team members, of which I am one. No one is irreplaceable, period. And the moment you start thinking you are, that will be addressed by another slide. There are a couple other things I want to mention here. So I loved what our keynote speaker just spoke about regarding essential workers. So when I came up here in July 2020, I came sight unseen to Westchester County because when I was supposed to come up and meet the team and see the facility, I came from the Palm Beach County Food Bank where I was executive director in Florida, and guess what happened? Floridians were put on quarantine. So I just came. So I had the honor of joining this team where they had an interim CEO who was based in Tennessee. Of course, when my predecessor resigned, we had no idea that COVID was right around the corner. The administrative teams were working from home. And our frontline folks, drivers, the selectors, folks pulling warehouse orders, they were at that office every day, weren't they? And how do you think that felt to them? Unfair, great word. Discouraging, great word. What? Sacrificed? Ooh, powerful word. Okay? And this is what I told them. I said to them, when I don't come to work, nobody notices. When you do not come to work, we cannot fulfill our mission. So our opportunity is to protect you all and not let anybody in here that doesn't need to be in here. Do you see the reframing? The other thing I want to say is, I also love that our keynote speaker spoke about DEI. Racism is systemic. I work in anti-hunger work. Poverty disproportionately impacts our black and brown neighbors. I tell our team, I want Feeding Westchester to be a place where every single team member can show up with their full and authentic voice. Woo! That is hard work. Very hard work. And it takes intention, which we spoke about. I'm quite confident that I fail at that frequently, right? Because what happens when the CEO is sitting in the CEO's corner office? CEO is like, I'm fabulous, right? I tell people kind of ad nauseum, my jokes were never as funny until I became CEO, right? I mean, literally, I have still a very clear memory of sitting in my then office at Ronald McDonald House Charities of Arkansas, and I made some smart-ass comment, and the room erupted in laughter with my team members. And I literally was taken aback. I'm pretty sure I looked behind me to see if I'd missed something, because it was not that funny, okay? And so, when can we involve others? When can we ask opinions? So some examples of that in my mind include that when we have had opportunities for very different medical care, right? We go to democratic process and we share the information about the different plans so that the majority of our team members can pick the plan that works best for their families. Because I don't know what's going on in your life, except what you honor and gift me with sharing, right? And so where are the places where we can ensure that individual voices are heard? I also could talk about this all day. We do employee engagement surveys annually, and that doesn't matter. We take that information, we hear what the team tells us, and we do our very best to do better. And then we ask again the next year. So that's the piece that is important in my mind, is did Karen decide that she had some really great ideas for the team and implement those? Or did Karen listen to the team, hear what truly matters to them, and either do my very best to bring it to fruition, or say, I heard you, and this is something, unfortunately, I cannot fix, and this is why. So, did I mention that I had really funny jokes once I became a CEO? Do not believe your own press. If I chose, the only thing I could hear throughout the course of a day is, oh my gosh, this is the best idea I ever heard. That is so fabulous. I'm so glad you thought about that. Well, no. So first of all, when you're thinking about being an intentional leader, and one of the members of my leadership team is here today, she gives me the gift of authentic feedback. Right? And y'all, that's invaluable. Okay, all you conflict-averse people, turn around, run out of here. Welcome conflict. Now, I tell you this for a couple reasons. First, with a full acknowledgement that it is really easy to welcome conflict when you are the CEO, right? Because I have the power structure in the organization. However, that is not what welcoming conflict means. What is it that we need to work through in order to have a genuine, transparent workplace, in order to be somewhere where all of our team members feel safe to show up authentically? One of my least favorite things in the world is triangulation. Who knows what triangulation is? Really? Janine, you want to share?
I think triangulation is when you've got three people that you're trying to work together in a productive way.
That's right? When instead of my saying to Janine, I felt really uncomfortable with the way that you stated that yesterday. I'd like us to talk that through. I'm curious. Can you tell me what that was about? Right? Instead of being curious, I go over to Avery and I go, Avery, you are not going to believe what Janine said to me today. Any of that sound familiar? I always say to myself, you better put on your big girl panties. Have difficult conversations, right? But it is only through those difficult conversations that we are able to move ahead together. So they're really, really important, in my opinion. So, I'm brand new executive director at Ronald McDonald House Charities of Arkansas, and I've been there a week, and I called my former CEO from the food bank where I had moved over, right, where I was a development director. I said to the CEO, oh my God, you did not tell me that CEOs have to be so dang nice all the time, because people care what you think. Right? Your opinion matters. When I was a development director, very few people cared what I thought. Right? And so the Maya Angelou saying, which can be overused, but it's true, people do not remember what you said. They remember how you made them feel. So at that ad agency I was with, right, 2015 to 2017, that I hated, I learned a lot. Hate that the correlation of how difficult something is pretty much directly tied to how much we have an opportunity to learn, right? It'd be way better if we could just disregard it. But I'm an external processor, which means that if I don't say something out loud, it practically didn't happen. And in addition, I'm half Turkish, okay? Now I tell you that because Turks, in my experience for my family, super loud, super dramatic, right? Love to tell a good story. So that's kind of how the way I reacted to things the first decades of my career. I was like, oh my God, I used to say, I have very short, I'm going to tell you almost exactly what I used to say, which is I have a very short fuse to what the hell were we thinking, okay? So I'm working at that ad agency, and something small had happened, and I can't believe, and whatever. And my supervisor at the time, she came to me and she said to me, you're like a speedboat. She said, you go zooming through here, and then you're done. Like, you're over it, right? Because I've purged and externally processed and feel great. She said, but the rest of us are back here bobbing in your wake. Let me tell you something. That was a really powerful analogy for me. And especially being a leader in a time of a, global pandemic, I have learned a lot about the value of being calm. I cannot tell you I remember it always, but I remember it mostly, and I work hard to do that every day. So I'm going to move on to the third bucket. We've got plenty of time to do that. Any questions, comments about culture? Y'all let me off easy. All right, let's talk about internal work. We've talked about that a little bit, right? I'm not a girl that's big on absolutes. What I mean by that is, often you will ask me a question and I will say, it depends. But I think this is an absolute. Critical to your ability to be successful is your willingness to see yourself clearly. What does that mean? Reflect, great one. Yeah, what else, y'all? Understand the areas that you're weaker in and then address them. Exactly, yep. Anybody else? So there's sort of two things that I've found as useful tools here. First of all, do you have 360s? You get informal feedback from your colleagues and or supervisor like almost daily, right? And so one of the things I think can be really interesting is there a disconnect between how you think people experience you and the feedback that you get? Like, that's a big one. Because the stories we tell ourselves, I am so good at this. Is that reinforced by the feedback that you get or not? Right? I have two daughters, they're grown, and I have said about our family, so I was a single mom, their daddy was up here, I raised my girls in Arkansas, and I have said for years, oh, we talk about everything. We put everything out on the table, we work through it, that's our beauty as a family. And not so long ago, my youngest daughter said to me, we talk about most things. Right? I know. I should have never encouraged her to speak as a child. Right? But it was a learning moment for me because I'm like, she's right. Like immediately I could think of about 10 things that we don't talk about. Right? And so the question becomes, is there alignment both between how folks experience you and then this is internal work? Is there alignment between your words and your actions? Okay, somebody asks you a question, you don't know the answer, what do you say? Lloyd says, it depends. Great question, great answer. I like that answer. All right, so hopefully what you say is, and I heard somebody say, I'll get back to you. Y'all, there is no shame in the game. You cannot know what you don't know. So when somebody asks you something that you don't know, I really encourage you to say, I don't know. The other, one of my favorite additional questions that sort of ties into this is, what does that mean? So in my meetings, if y'all use the phrase, I don't know, or somebody's got some initials that they toss out with confidence, and I don't know what they mean, I'm like, what does that mean? Okay? What you know, you can feel really good and confident about. And the only way you're going to know more is if you acknowledge what you don't know and figure it out. All right. Not every difficult conversation has to be conflict. So I included this separately. Have difficult conversations. I have an example that I pull out, which is the DO example. DO being short for deodorant. Anybody ever worked at an organization and they get a memo that stresses the importance of personal hygiene, and the entire team knows that it was because of that one person that nobody was willing to have a difficult conversation with? And when we are kind and thoughtful and genuine, it makes difficult conversations easier. I have been watching Law and Order SVU. And I'm telling you, I watch Olivia Benson have these conversations with these families or men or women that are in crisis, and I am taking notes. Because she very kindly, compassionately says some really, 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 really difficult things. So find someone to mirror and learn from. So this is a big one. right up there with I don't know, but as you become more of a leader, this is so critical. Y'all, I screw up all the time. The only way you are not making mistakes is if you are doing the exact same thing in the exact same way every single day and every single time you do it. Well, first of all, no. Like if you know, business as usual is not my language, it's not my comfort zone, right? But second of all, we have to normalize failure. We have to normalize doing things wrong. And then we hold ourselves accountable. And we say, hey, listen, I'm so sorry. I screwed up. And then one of my favorites. So it's possible that if we pass this mic around the room and I said to you, what does success look like for you? We're in a room, we're talking about what it takes, in my opinion, to be a successful CEO, some of the things I've learned along the way. And so every single one of y'all might go, I want to be a CEO. But in the world, people define success very differently, right? And so if you are traveling a path, but it just doesn't feel right, there's so much opportunity there to figure out why and then course correct. Always, 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 always. Not sometimes, always listen to your gut. And then finally, and again, we could spend quite a bit of time discussing this, leave well. So when I resigned as executive director of the Ronald McDonald House Charities of Arkansas, and I resigned because I read a horoscope that said, don't worry about being your best, worry about being your most genuine. And what I realized is it was a time in my career when I had been so worried about doing what I thought everybody else considered a good job, I had lost touch with myself. And it's when I said, I can lead even if I'm not a CEO, and I left and learned a lot and fell flat on my face about 4 times. But one of my board members who was at the Children's Hospital, he called me in and he said to me, the reason I was able to come back to Arkansas Children's Hospital after I had left here, gone to Madison Children's Hospital, he said, is because I left well, and people don't talk about it enough. And so how can you do your very best to set up either your successor, if you get promoted, right? Or the person, well, also your successor, whether or not you get promoted, whether or not you leave the organization, doesn't matter. How can you ensure that the person who holds that position after you has the greatest opportunity for success? Transferring institutional knowledge, sharing cultural norms that are not written down anywhere, also super important. Okay? So, those are the 3 buckets and some of the things I feel like I've learned over the past many years. So, it's Q&A. I'm very hopeful y'all will participate. Who's got questions? Great.
Thanks so much. Steve McDermott. I'm curious to learn about mentorship and who you seeked out over the course of your career, and as you went more senior, where did you look for people to mentor you?
Well, that is so great, Steve. Thank you for asking that. So, y'all, I started my professional career out in corporate advertising and marketing. Love, love, love the work, right? I still do much of that same work now. Hated the product. And in addition, I was in a rural southern state, Arkansas. I was in very historically entrenched smaller corporations. And for example, one of the ad agencies I worked at was 4 founding men, all of whom had sons, and all of those sons worked at the ad agency. I see some folks nodding, right? And so literally, I spent years in my early career going, pick me, I'm smart, I know I can do it. I believe in myself, I can do it, and feeling passed over. And then my first nonprofit my first nonprofit job, my nonprofit CEO changed the trajectory of my career. 3rd day of the job, her husband said to me, Phyllis has really big plans for you. Changed my life. Because instead of screaming and hollering and trying to get recognition and opportunity, Phyllis gave it to me. And so she was my first true mentor, other than my daddy, and that's a whole different topic, but he taught me a lot about business. And what I would say to you is, I carry much of what she taught me today. I have the opportunity to speak to a lot of young professionals, and that's something that's really important to me because so many people lifted me up. And the people I continue to reach out to is multiple. So I'm a connector. I did not show y'all on that first slide. I moved 11 times in 8 years and 4 of them were cross country. And so I've had an opportunity to meet a lot of people. I met folks when I was waiting tables. I met folks when I was a CEO. And I stay in touch with a lot of them. And so depending on what I'm trying to puzzle through, I reach out to them. In addition, Feeding Westchester is part of a national organization, Feeding America. And what that means for me is that I have almost 200 CEOs doing the same work I'm doing in their own community. So again, it gives me the resources to reach out to when I'm struggling. One of the reasons I am in food banking today is because I have experienced, generally, the leadership of food bank leaders as being very transparent. So if I call you up and I ask them for advice on something, they'll be like, oh yeah, we're doing this part really well, and we are doing this part really poorly. And it has offered me the opportunity to incorporate that transparency into my own life and journey. Thank you.
A little bit on that question. You talked a lot about building future leaders and succession. How do you build in that intentional professional development with your team?
That's why we have an HR department. No, I'm just kidding. So she asked, well, I'm sort of kidding. So Feeding Westchester, let me just give you my excuses first. So I've been here almost 4 years exactly. 2 of those years, we didn't have an on-site full-time HR lead. However, the way I lift folks up, or at least the way so the formal part, Feeding Westchester, is just now beginning to do better because we have a VP of HR who's helping us with that. From an informal standpoint, though, what I hope my team experiences from me is transparency about both my own shortcomings and my journey. I hope that my team members that give me the opportunity get sort of real-time coaching. So feedback that is genuine and intentional and thoughtful. And then I get to do fun things like this, where I meet young folks. So we participate in the Emerging Leaders Program with Nonprofit Westchester, and I've gotten to speak to those rooms once a year. So those are some of the ways that I do that. And then, like I said, super delighted to have a leader now at the organization that will help us do better. The other thing that I will say, because I like to talk about this, because I think many times it's uncomfortable to talk about, I have been very intentional about my DEI journey. Feeding America, I serve as a liaison to the National EDI Committee. We have done faltering but never stopping DEI work in-house. And so I think that's another opportunity to be able to be transparent about a reality that many of our colleagues experience.
I wanted to ask you about the 360 review. I have always done completely anonymous reviews, and I'm curious, how do you feel about that?
Completely anonymous? So the 360 is anonymous, but you don't find yourself in a situation either with your direct reports or your supervisor where you are clear where the feedback is coming from? Yep. And then it's in the aggregate. Yep. So I would not be able to do that, and let me tell you why. Multiple reasons. I am not comfortable speaking to things that I don't see and presenting them as if I know them. Because I think that people's perspectives vary widely. Like if after this session I say to y'all, what Karen talk about, y'all are gonna have different answers, right? And so I feel a commitment to being able to say to someone, listen, I'm getting inconsistent feedback from your peers, as an example. Or, when I saw you in the hallway the other day with your colleague, this is how I experienced it. But that distinction between firsthand impressions and someone else's impression that I'm bringing to the table is important to me. So what I mean by that is I would not be comfortable sitting across from a colleague and saying, hey, one of your colleagues tells me, oh good, love that. Sorry, wrong answer. All right, one last question. Yes, sir.
One thing you mentioned in the very beginning of this presentation was really about learning everything about everything. So I'd love to learn more about in what places and spaces are you finding opportunities to learn everything about everything, because it's important.
So also, I probably should work on my phrasing on that, because like y'all weren't exhausted enough, I'm telling you to learn everything about your business. When I was coming up in nonprofits, what it meant to me was understanding the why. So for example, we're a distribution business. Let's just say I've been sitting in a meeting and at the time a non-CEO and my colleague says, this month we distributed 200,000 fewer pounds than we did last month. My question will be why? And so starting to build my knowledge about how we work as an organization and an industry has paid off immeasurably for me. And it also, I literally call it the building blocks, okay? Because if someone comes to you and they say to you, pounds are down 200,000 this month, and you go, oh, okay. When you come to my office, guess what I'm gonna say? Why? Why are they down? Right? And so learning those building blocks, learning how our functions are interrelated, I think is very valuable. Did I answer your question? Okay, you come see me. All right, so thank y'all so much for joining me today. I wish you the best of luck on your journey. Thank you. Nothing like a tech glitch. Sorry.
Oh,